Hey, everybody. What is going on? Glad you all could join us today on this fine, I guess, Thursday evening. I don't know where you live, but the weather's pretty good on my end, so we're good on that respect. Just gonna give it a couple of more seconds here before we get started. Let some people trickle in since I just blasted everybody with the stuff. And I also have to open up my restream chat. Excuse me. So we didn't get to do much news last week. We had to talk to CounterPoints. If you didn't watch any of that, it is currently up, or at least part of the conversation is currently up on YouTube. So I highly recommend you all check that out because it's a great video. It's got a lot of info on it about why I think the Destiny and ABBA donations to the Atlanta Police Foundation were a little problematic, but not for the same reasons that you might think a lefty would say. This isn't to say that I'm against donating money to police, but it gave their enemies fodder. We explained that. This is just water. Nothing fancy in that thermos. But thanks for the follow. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. Let me see what your name is. Let's see who just followed me. Equalizing Distort. Thank you for the follow. Be started here in a second. But yeah, this is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this every Thursday, roughly from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We do this every Thursday unless stated otherwise. Usually we'll announce that on our either Mastodon account, so at Federated Press, CSP Cypher at Federated Press, or on Twitter, which is at Crowdsource Poll. We'll tell you if we're running late or can't do it this week or what have you. And of course, on our Discord. So you can find those there. But yeah, but we do this every Thursday. We also do other stuff. We're going to be relaunching Cypher State. And Cypher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast where myself and other guests talk about international relations from different political and international lenses. Realpolitik is really strong suit of ours, but we also have other lenses that we look through things, specifically demographics, land, that sort of stuff. So it's pretty interesting things. We've covered stuff such as the UK having issues with inflation and their prime ministers. We also covered the Ethiopian Civil War, among other stuff. So you can check that out wherever you get your podcast and on our YouTube channel. So we're going to be doing that again. And we're also do debates. So last week we had a discussion with CounterPoints. We like him. He's a really good dude. Very down to earth guy. Twitch's #1 conservative among all the lefties. So that should tell you kind of where he's at with stuff like that. But we also do other debates with other people. I've debated Rob Noor. I've been on several panels. And tomorrow I am going to be on Modern Day Debates. So be sure to check that out on their channel. We'll cross-post it on our channel for that. But really recommend everybody watching it on Modern Day Debates from here instead of watching it on the live stream, because we're not going to live stream it. I'm just going to record it so I can post it separately on my channel. That way I'm not distracted by chat while I'm trying to debate two people. So we'll be doing that. The topic is I am going to be against the patriarchy. I do not know who I'm debating. I do not know who my partner is. I'm going in blind. So it's going to be a good time. Good time to fight the patriarchy, right? So we should be good there. But if you want to debate me on anything, got the ways to reach out. Discord, Twitch, Mastodon, Facebook even, shit. I don't care, email. You can get a hold of me any different way. And yeah, we'll arrange something. We'll arrange a debate. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get the show started. Oh, Wrong button. Sorry. Let's get the show started now. We begin tonight, as always, with updates on Russia's war on Ukraine. This is the 463rd day of the Russian invasion. First up from the Hill. It was another bad week in Ukraine for Russian President Vladimir Putin, bad enough to launch criminal retaliation strikes against civilian targets in Kyiv, which largely failed anyways. Russian ground forces are being routed and humiliated routinely. Entire formations with their officers have surrendered. UK supplied Storm Shadow missile strikes with impunity at any location once considered not at risk. And Russia's border is not secure either. We saw evidence of when a pro-Ukrainian Russian volunteer corps, along with the Freedom of Russia Legion, conducted a raid into Belgorod Oblast. We reported on that last week or the week before when we debated some people on the Lee the Waterkai's channel. And there's separatist groups. They're kind of fashy, so not really a win-win, but it did take pressure off of Ukraine. Continuing on, the skies over Moscow also remain porous. On May 30th, we saw a repeat of the drone strike on the flagpole on top of the Kremlin prior to the Victory Day parade. Ukraine remains undeterred, with President Zelensky defiantly announcing on May 29th that a decision had been made concerning the timing of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. The head games continue, real and imagined, including action, reaction, and counterreaction. Only this time, it is Ukraine dictating the conditions. Deep strikes, raids, reconnaissance, in force, supporting efforts, main effort. Russia must now prepare for all contingencies along a 900-mile front. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian army gets stronger and the Russian soldiers in his foxhole is left to wonder, what is going to be next? Am I going to be the one that dies? Putin essentially is down to his nukes in Ukraine. And even he likely knows that they are not a viable winning option. That was from reporting from The Hill. Turning now to The Guardian, President Zelensky has urged international community to put concrete quote-unquote security guarantees in place in Ukraine and its neighbor Moldova to give the countries enduring protection against Russian aggression. The Ukrainian president said he would also be speaking on Thursday to, quote, partner countries about putting in place a potential air jet coalition and a coalition providing Patriot missiles. NATO foreign ministers are meeting in Oslo. Repeating that. NATO foreign ministers are meeting in Oslo, where the French foreign minister, Catherine Colonna, said that NATO alliance needed to think about what kind of security guarantees it could give Ukraine. Lithuanian's foreign minister said the time had now come for NATO members to find a concrete answer to the question of how Ukraine could become a member. French President Macron also urged NATO to offer Ukraine tangible and credible security assurances, arguing that it was in the West's interest to do so, as Kyiv is, quote-unquote, protecting Europe on the whole. Leaders will meet in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, in July to discuss NATO membership for Ukraine. Lots of moving things happening, lots of stuff going on with this. I have argued in the past that maybe, Ukraine shouldn't be joining NATO. Maybe it'll piss off Putin a little too much. It'll be an existential threat. But with the invasion into Ukraine, those bets are kind of off now. And also, it puts Russia on notice that we, the West, Europe, will not tolerate an incursion into borders that are strategic to us as well as Russia. So there is that. For their part, Sweden's foreign minister Tobias Billström is in Oslo and said that the time had come for Turkey and Hungary to ratify his nation's NATO membership application. Quote, "We have fulfilled all our commitments," he said. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he would soon travel to Turkey to discuss Sweden's NATO membership. For people that may not know, the reason that Turkey is against Sweden joining the alliance is because they do not believe that Sweden itself has been hardline enough against groups it considers to be terrorist organizations, and in contrary to what Turkey's interests. These are largely Kurdish groups that are fighters, freedom fighters, committing terrorist attacks, etc., in Turkey for their own independence. As of this week, as said by the Swedish Prime Minister, that they believe they have met the assurances that they needed to give to Turkey in order to have Turkey admit them into the alliance. For membership into NATO, it can be vetoed by a single member, and Turkey is the last holdout. That is where we are with that. Continuing on, the US on Wednesday announced a $300 million arms package for Ukraine as well. The package includes air defense systems and tens of millions of rounds of ammunition. The US warned Kyiv that US weaponry should not be used for attacks within Russia, though. Quote, "We have been very clear with the Ukrainians privately. We've certainly been clear publicly that we do not support attacks inside Russia," said National Security Council spokesman John Kirby. A German government spokesman on Wednesday said Ukraine has the right to attack Russian territory as it qualifies as self-defense. Now, this is kind of an interesting back and forth that's going on here. The United States, is trying to play this delicate balance of self-defense versus self-defense offensive capabilities, and whether or not we're going to be dragged into, at least officially in Russia's mind, more so than what we already are, into that war. If there is incursions into Russia using U.S. weaponry, provided weaponry, stuff that we've been giving them, not just they bought off the open market, that could give Putin some validity in saying, oh, the United States is itself invading Russia, and escalate the tensions there. I think that should not be considered to be relevant so much in this conflict, especially since Russia is the aggressor. However, it does make sense that we would say, hey, don't use our stuff to punch Russia in the face inside Russian territory. But Germany has a different idea, and their idea is what we just said, that this is considered to be a self-defensive measure because it pulls forces away from the front lines to shore up their own border protection, and thus allows Ukraine to continue its forward assault back into its own territory. Both of these positions are genuine and reasonable to have. They're not they're contradictory if a single person has them, but they're not contradictory to say that they both are reasonable positions. Personally, I think what Ukraine is doing as of right now, with some, scattered forces making incursions into Russian territory, is fair game because of the fact that they've been invaded. And I don't think we should really care about what Russia says at this juncture, especially since they violated international law and, for that matter, morality. And we made those cases in our debates over the last few weeks. One that we're going to have to put on YouTube this weekend, so y'all can see that. I just wanted to preface it with some stuff before I put it up there, just so that it was clear where I was coming from during that debate, and to kind of say, hey, don't call this person an idiot, yada yada, since that wasn't very clear within the debate itself. I wanted to do that, and so that will be posted this weekend. Continuing on, though, there's only about 500 people left in Bakhmut, the city in eastern Ukraine, that has been subject to heavy fighting in the last year, according to its mayor. The figure, reported by the Ukrainian news agency UNIAN, is a tiny fraction of its pre-war population of 70,000. Business Insider reports that Russia has defaulted to using disposable troops as their war equipment dwindles and ground forces suffer large losses as well. These infantry troops are given little training and the most dangerous missions. Essentially, what we've been seeing over the last 6 months or so is that Putin has called for a generalized mobilization, and that reports have come in that they've been even taking 16-year-olds off the street and throwing them to the front lines with minimal equipment, let alone training. They're not basically getting any training, but they're getting junk as far as equipment is concerned, because for all of history, Russia's just been like, well, we have a bunch of people, throw them at them. They'll eventually die. And I don't think that's a way to win a war anymore. Oh no, I didn't update. Dang. I did not update the titles. Oopsie doopsie. Oopsie doops. Well, we'll just do that. CSP News Roundup. Let me fix this real quick. That might be why nobody's watching. 0, 1, 23. Oh, there was also music was playing in the background. Update all. Really? Huh. Well, okay. Sorry, everybody. I gotta update the titles. I didn't realize they were bad. Okay, that one updated. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and continue on here. No need to dilly-dally anymore. So, Business Insider has reported that Russia has defaulted to using disposable troops, and that includes 16-year-olds being given low training, very bad equipment, and being chucked to the front lines. After February of 2022, Russia commanders watched their battalion's tactical groups fail due to poor tactics that made Western-styled combined arms warfare infeasible. So Russia's military reverted to an informal system from the Red Army's playbook, create multiple classes of riflemen, ranging from the most valuable to the most expendable. It now uses 4 types of infantry: specialized, assault, line, and disposable, according to a recent report by the Royal United Services Institute, a British think tank. These include conscripts from Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republic, Wagner Group prison recruits, and civilians scooped up in Russia's limited mobilization dragnet. Limited. Again, we have reason to believe that that they're taking 16-year-olds and throwing them in there as well. So yeah, that's a thing. So they're sometimes sent into battle while high on drugs as well, according to Ukrainian reports. Not surprisingly, the disposables lead the assault, not in waves, but rather in teams of 2 to 5 men sent forward to make contact with Ukrainian positions. The disposable infantry troops often continue trying to advance from their own lines when they try to retreat. Captured Russian fighters have reported executions under similar circumstances. More cannon fodder will then be sent until Ukrainians have revealed their positions and exhausted their ammunition. Disposable troops are fed into the meat grinder and killed or wounded before they can gain enough experience to survive. An army that can afford such a cynical use of troops either has enough manpower to waste, which demographically challenged Russia does not, or it is desperate because its forces have proven too ineffective for anything else. Additionally, Business Insider has also reported today that almost 90% of Russia's missiles and drones were shot down in Ukraine in May, according to a Ukrainian analysis. The Kremlin launched at least 563 missiles and Iranian-manufactured kamikaze drones in Ukraine that month, and 533 of them were neutralized. These drones are small little drones. They're about the size of a person, not very big, basically strapped with some C4 and thrown to the wind. Drive in. Evening maybe is me. Glad you could join us. And so that's what they're talking about here. On May 29th, we also saw the most drones and missiles deployed in a single day, with 35 Iranian Shaheds and 51 missiles being deployed by Russia. Around 89.5% of them were shot down per the Kyiv Post. That failure rate eclipses earlier estimates from the United States, which said that in 2022 that as much as 60% of Russia's missiles never reached their target. Now, the Kyiv Post is engaged in kind of this information warfare. The United States is engaged in this information warfare as well. So that's probably somewhere between those two numbers. I wouldn't say that it's going to be for sure 60% or less. I wouldn't say it would much less given what we've seen from actual footage of this. But to say it's about 90% of it ineffective, maybe that's not quite right either. So take it with a grain of salt, split the difference. Maybe it's around 80% or so. Now, the commander of the joint forces of the armed forces of Ukraine assessed that its mixture of European and American-made air defense systems has efficiency of at least 80% or higher, according to the Tuesday reports by CNN. So, like we said, roughly 80% probably is about right. Meanwhile, Ukraine said on Sunday that its long-range Storm Shadow missiles supplied by the UK in May have hit 100% of their intended targets. So we have lots of reporting from Ukraine on this. They're about to start their offensive. Once the offensive starts in Ukraine, once that counteroffensive starts, we will be doing a show from Cypher State, and we'll be publishing it across platforms, YouTube, every single streaming platform that you can think of when it comes to podcast, and we're going to have a highly produced episode for that. That will be one of our first, or maybe our second episode, depends on when the counteroffensive starts, or we're going to bring back Cypher State. I don't know who is going to participate on that show. Hopefully I can get Dylan Burns. Hopefully I can get Tiberius on there to give their thoughts and opinions about it as well. And it's going to be lots of history of what has happened in Ukraine. So we're talking from the start of the Civil War to the counteroffensive. We're talking a good, solid podcast. As much information as we can jam into a podcast, maybe 2 episodes in roughly 2 to 3 hours. So that's one of the things that you can look forward to. Again, catch that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. But that concludes our segment about Ukraine. All right. If you're just joining us, hey everybody, welcome. So glad you could be here. This is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this typically on Thursdays from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. As we just got done saying, you can also check out other podcasts on our YouTube channel and across podcast streaming platforms. Cypher State is one of those podcasts, and we'll be doing more video essays and long-form podcasts as well. Those will be both published to YouTube and to podcast streaming platforms, and they're going to be designed to be a bit more timeless. So history lessons, analysis of upcoming technologies, maybe a little bit of philosophies, a little bit of opinions, some recaps about Reaganism. Who knows? Can run the gamut. Our first episode, though, the relaunch of the podcast, as well as the YouTube essays, will be on AI. That is going to be published sometime in June. We're going to produce a lot of information about that, covering what AI is, what AI was supposed to be, what it actually is, where we fit into it, and ethics involved in using it. So that will be about an hour or so long essay where we'll cover those topics. And it should be a good time. Some of that episode will be produced with the use or help of AI. So be sure to check that out when it goes live. But let us now continue on to national politics. And we're going to, of course, talk about today the debt ceiling, because a lot of news came out today. A lot of news came out about this week. We've been covering this for weeks, but now we have a bunch of information to share as there's been additional updates. Hey, Tiberius, glad you could join us. So let's get to it. The debt ceiling was the focus in the U.S. Congress again this week, as news emerged over the weekend that Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, and President Biden reached a deal. Despite harsh rhetoric from Republican House hardliners and threats to vote against it, the House passed the quote, Fiscal Responsibility Act, or FRA, last night. The bill was approved by a margin of 314 to 117. Republicans delivered 149 yes votes. The remaining yes votes came from Democrats. Now, this act lifts the government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling in exchange for cutting non-defense discretionary spending and stiffening work requirements in assistance programs. But it was a bruising victory, if you can even call it that, for Speaker McCarthy. The bill gained 165 votes from Democrats, outnumbering the 149 from members of McCarthy's own party. One vote, mind you, one vote less than what McCarthy said that he could deliver. The Senate received the bill this morning, where debate is ongoing as we went to air. That chamber was expected to pass the bill quickly and send it on to the president's desk for signatures. In fact, both Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, and Kentucky Republican leader Mitch McConnell have pledged the votes of their parties. McConnell said this morning that the Senate will remain in session until the bill is passed. But there are potential flies in the ointment, with hard right Republicans like Senator Mike Lee pledging to employ procedural hurdles to delay the bill's passage until the country is forced into default. As our copy producer prepared for tonight's roundup, other senators took the floor to register their intentions to vote no on the bill, unless it's amended to remove caps on defense spending. Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been vocal supporter of Ukraine's fight against Russia, spoke to this point early this afternoon on the floor of the Senate. And I forgot to turn on my other screen, so oopsie daisy. Give me a second, everybody, while I get this situated. All right, we're going to turn over to that in just a second. Okay, cool. All right, we're going to go turn over to that now. Oops. All right, we're going to turn over to that now. Sorry about that. All right, here we are going to listen to Senator Lindsey Graham talk about it.
I want to compliment Senator Cotton for reminding us what the job in Congress is to defend the nation, and the odd outcome here is at a time of growing conflict, we're reducing the Navy. There are 296 ships in the Navy today. Under this budget, by 2025, there'll be 286. If we continue with the Biden budget, there'll be 290. The Chinese Navy today is 340. By 2025, they'll have 400. By 2030...
So it's clear that Republicans, well, pretty much anybody that's a defense hawk at this point, is very worried about a rising China. So Lindsey Graham is going to list off a ton of things about where China's military is in relation to the United States in raw numbers of ships. But that doesn't take into account that the Chinese-made ships are kind of shitty. So take this complaint with a little bit of grain of salt, simply because the American Navy is still one of the best, actually the best Navy in the world right now, as our destroyers are better than anybody else's, including the tugboat ones that are coming out of China. I'm sure Tiberius D could give more information about that for you all on his own show, but yeah, we'll just let him continue.
They'll have 440. This budget locks in a smaller U.S. Navy at a time the Chinese Navy is growing dramatically.
Yes, the printout. Yeah, okay.
There's not a penny in this budget to help beat Putin. The Navy is smaller, the Army is smaller, the Marine Corps is smaller. This is not a threat-based budget. This is a budget of political compromise where people have lost sight of what the country needs. We need safety and security. To my House colleagues, I can't believe you did this. To the Speaker, I know you got a tough job. I like you. But the party of Ronald Reagan is dying. Don't tell.
Yes, the party of Ronald Reagan is dying, and Lindsey, no spine Graham, had a part in that play. Sorry, dude. You bent the knee to Trump. just like everybody else. So you are just as much to blame for this as they are. Just because you reside in the Senate that has a bit more, I don't know, somewhat je ne sais quoi, as you would say, that we do not, doesn't mean that you aren't culpable, my guy.
Tell me that a defense budget that's $42 billion below inflation fully funds the military. Don't tell me that we can confront and challenge China. Everybody in this body is patting themselves on the back that we see China as the most existential threat to America. You are right. We did the CHIPS Act. We're doing things to help our economy combat China. At the moment of decision, when it came to the military, this budget is a win for China. Please don't go home and say this is fully funded, because it is not. Please stop talking about confronting China when you're dismantling the American Navy. How does this end?
This is so what this is boiling down to, for the most part, is that because the House insisted on capping spending to, I believe it is 2022 levels, there has been a decent amount of inflation between 2022 and 2023, which we'll get into later in the program. And that effectively means a cut for the military. It means a cut for pretty much every single program. When the government cuts spending, that also impacts the economy. This is the kind of things that we're expected to see. We expected this. This program, you all, people that are in the know when it comes to politics, that this was going to happen. There was not going to be a way other than Biden invoking the 14th Amendment solution to not seeing some sort of compromise on the debt ceiling because of the penny-wise, pound foolishness that is going on in the House of Representatives, specifically among the Freedom Caucus. That should just be clear to everybody. We can complain about how much money we're spending. We can complain about where that money is going. But it should, at the very least, keep up with inflation. And there should not be anything at all like a debt ceiling. We've made that abundantly clear. I have made it abundantly clear that the debt ceiling is stupid. It creates dumb compromises like this. And there's no reason for it. We passed a budget. If you don't like the budget, pass another budget. Get the money back that way. You only need 50 senators to pass budgets. You can do continuing resolutions, pass budgets. There is no reason whatsoever to have a debt ceiling. It's just another weapon for kooks to try to hold the American people hostage to their ideology. And Graham, you bent the knee. You're just as much to blame. We're going to let this play out for another, we might let it play for the whole time, but that is what we have to say here.
Senator Cotton's right. We'll be here to Tuesday until I get commitments that we're going to rectify some of these problems. The
Good luck, buddy.
ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, Susan Collins, has been steadfastly in the camp of fiscal responsibility and national security. This deal has taken the Appropriations Committee out of the game. The CR, which kicks in, cuts defense and increases non-defense, making it really hard for me to believe that we're actually going to do our appropriations job. So what I want to do, I want a commitment.
Yeah, Nikki is right. The US and Denmark are the only countries who have this stupid limit. Every other country on the planet passes budgets and then borrows money to meet those budgets. They want to cut spending, they cut spending in the government. They don't do these stupid debt ceiling things. That's a good photo for Graham. You should take that. Let's continue.
From the leaders of this body that we're not pulling the plug on Ukraine. There's not a penny in this bill.
And that's the difference between Freedom Caucus members and general Republicans as well. Freedom Caucus doesn't give a fuck about Ukraine. They don't. A lot of people in America don't give a fuck about Ukraine. Get it. It's in our interest. It's in the American interest to see Russia lose in that war for a number of different reasons. Even if you're just rankly selfish, you don't care about, I don't know, what happens to other countries. You don't want to see your gas prices go up. You don't want to see your buddy lose a job because Russia controls more oil, natural gas, and they're able to outbid the United States selling their oil and natural gas to other countries. You know? Just saying.
Still, for future efforts to help Ukraine defeat Russia, and they're going to gain on the battlefield in the coming days. And it's just not about Ukraine. I want a commitment that we'll have a supplemental to make us better able to deal with China. I want a commitment that we're not going to weaken our position in the Mideast. There's a report out today that Iran is planning to attack our troops in Syria to drive us out. We're expending weapons that need to be replenished. Our military is weakening by the day. This budget that we're about to pass.
The military isn't weakening by the day. Now, with giving a lot of weapons and ammunition and that sort of thing to Ukraine, yes, the United States needs to rebuild its stockpile. Because the United States, what's the tactics, strategy? I don't remember the exact term for it, but, doctrine, military doctrine. The United States' military doctrine is to have enough force, so weapons, troops, etc., to fight a war on two fronts. Because that's what we had to do for World War II and World War I. We had to fight a war on two fronts. So we don't have that. If we don't have the ability to quickly replenish supplies, which requires a stockpile, you don't have the ability to fight a war on two fronts. There's got a little bit of point there. Maybe we shouldn't care about fighting a war on two fronts. Maybe we should be a little less militaristic. Maybe we should be a little more diplomatic. These are all valid opinions that I hold. World police isn't necessarily a good thing. But in the interim, before there's other people that can, build their militaries or what have you, U.S. is going to be that central pillar in defense, especially of the Western world, especially of the, we'll say G7 countries of and their allies, Japan, Australia, etc. So not just Western, but democratic world. And yeah, so if we leave that, it creates a power vacuum, and that power vacuum will be filled by other players that also have large militaries. We've found out recently that Russia's military is just a giant paper tiger, and China right now is having its own economic issues. But that isn't to say that we can pull back necessarily right now from defense spending, from defense in general. At least not with other countries putting in a large share. One of the things that Trump was right about and actually helped bring about a bit better, because it freaked them out. Not the way I would have had it happen, but yeah, that's what happened.
Makes every problem worse. I want to end the war in Ukraine by defeating Putin.
I do too.
If you don't, he keeps going, and we're going to have a conflict between NATO and Russia, and our troops will be involved. And if you don't send a clear signal now,
he's not wrong.
China will
Moldova
see this
as
an opportunity.
Like people don't understand this. Russia's stated goal from leaks and intelligence reports and everything else was to not stop with Ukraine, not stop with Eastern Ukraine. They were trying to take over all of Ukraine, move into Moldova and Georgia, and put themselves right on the border of Poland. And had anything popped off, or any inkling of a weakened front against them, they would have invaded Poland. Because one of the primary, not necessarily missions, raison d'etres for this attack, this invasion, was to push out the war that Russia sees coming from the West inevitably off of Russia itself, and instead have vassal states to absorb the brunt of any conflict that would pop off between Russia and Europe proper. And that has historically been how it is. which is why when the United States expanded NATO or helped expand NATO, it really did freak out the Russians. It is one of the things that a lot of lefties and a certain kind of conservative, Kissinger, are correct on. But it does not justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But Lindsey Graham's right here. That was exactly what was going to happen. Let's continue.
The leap into Taiwan. So to the members of this body, we're staying here.
Oh, that was missed a little bit. So let's go back. Talking about China here.
If you don't, he keeps going, and we're going to have a conflict between NATO and Russia, and our troops will be involved.
True.
And if you don't send a clear signal now, China will see this as an opportunity to leap into Taiwan.
Yes.
So to the members of this body, we're staying here as long as it takes to get some commitment that we're going to reverse this debacle sooner rather than later. With that, I'll yield.
All right, so that's the end of the Lindsey Graham stuff. He's got a lot of good points in there, but you know what? It's not worth defaulting over. Fight the budget over. Fight it over later. But let's continue on. Those, like we said, was Senator Graham's word, and several senators echoed his sentiments after he spoke. But let's now turn over to what's in the bill itself. Which side won and which side lost? Let's go ahead and get into that. We could quibble about whether the Compromise Fiscal Responsibility Act is a debt ceiling measure or a budget negotiation. Speaker McCarthy claimed victory for the bill as a debt ceiling measure that, for the first time in history, included limitations on spending. The Republican chair of the House and Ways Committee disputes that claim, though. The White House, for its part, contends that the talks between Biden and McCarthy were not a negotiation on the debt ceiling. Quote, the debt ceiling had to be lifted. It had to be lifted for a long period of time. White House Budget Director Shalanda Young said on Tuesday. Continuing on, you see, this bill lifts the debt ceiling until 2025. You can call it a negotiation. I call it a declarative statement. That's just... No, there was a negotiation that happened. You're trying to walk that back, Biden. I see what you're doing, you silly goose. Come on, man. You can't get those ones over our eyes. Come on. But to her point, though, the bill doesn't raise the limit to a certain level. Instead, it suspends the debt ceiling entirely until January of 2025, when the next Congress is seated. This allows the government to pay its bills until then without the leverage of another negotiation process in the run-up to 2024 presidential election, which House Republicans originally demanded. This is a win for the Biden administration because this takes it off of the table politically speaking. They can't use it as leverage against Biden during election year, and there you go. They can't crush the economy and try to blame Biden for it. So, to that point, good. Wish it didn't have to happen. Sorry if you could hear that. Wish it didn't have to happen, though. Because what Republicans wanted was a freeze on overall spending for 10 years, with a rise in defense spending and cuts to other budgets. The agreement keeps non-defense spending flat next year with a 1% rise in 2025, which is a cut due to the amount of inflation. The implication of this belt-tightening is as yet, though, unclear. There are no budget caps after 2025, something else that hard-right Republicans expressed anger about. But again, those budget caps don't really matter because they can just be passed over. This is all stupid, right? Like, what they're complaining about is that they can't use this as a negotiating lever against Biden during a presidential election and go back to their constituents and be like, we did it. We took on Biden and won. Can't say that anymore. So that's probably where a lot of the grumbling is coming from. The White House, though, estimates government spending would be reduced by at least $1 trillion, according to the AP News, but official calculations have not yet been released. Ironically, the president's budget, which Republicans rejected outright, would have reportedly saved American taxpayers $3 trillion. And the reason that they rejected it is because of increases in taxes. Now, Republicans had demanded that the Inflation Reduction Act provisions for $80 billion for the IRS to rein in tax cheats and hire support personnel be clawed back. The compromise, though, rescinds $1.4 billion for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. In other words, we'll still see some more IRS agents be hired. And remember, folks, remember, these IRS agents aren't just the people that come and do the audits. They are the people that they take your calls. They help you get your money back because of mistakes that the government made. They help people, find tax cheats, and then they also help with money laundering and stuff like that. It's not just we're going to audit every single middle-class American on the planet to get our grubby little hands off of that good, sweet middle-class money, because that's not how the IRS operates. If anything, an increase in the IRS budget allows them to go after bigger targets because, and this should be obvious to anyone, because it takes more money to go after tax cheats that have money to defend themselves in court, which is what we want. We want to go after those higher tax cheats. Republicans wanted to gut all of it. They could have put in some sort of law or something like these agents cannot spend most of their time going after middle class people if you make under 120K or whatever the limit is, you're not allowed to audit this person unless there's some egregious thing, blah, 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 right? They could have put that into the law, but they didn't. That should show you where the priorities are. It should be pretty obvious. And not coincidentally either, this is approximately the IRS plans to spend to hire new agents. The IRS has indicated that this recession ultimately will not impact their hiring plans. There you go. According to Business Insider, the White House says that the debt deal also includes a separate agreement to take $20 billion from the IRS over the next 2 years. Those funds would be diverted to other non-defense programs. The Biden administration officials are offering assurances that the spending cuts secured by Republican negotiations will have minimal impact on the agency's operation over the next few years. The agency is on course to still get nearly 3/4 of the $80 billion boost that Congress approved for it last year. The amount of boosting this happens, and if it's not going to actually impact their hiring too much, makes me think that this was done for a little bit of leverage. Give them a bit more money, take a little bit out, say that you compromise, but it didn't actually impact your plans. 4D chess kind of moves. Maybe, probably not, but it's funny to think about. Not only that, though, the agency has flexibility to spend some of that money sooner than planned, officials stressed. Quote, the IRS has the resources it needs in the near term to improve customer service and go after wealthy and corporate tax evaders, the Deputy Secretary Wally I can't pronounce these people's names. Wally Adimo tweeted. In April, IRS leaders released details on how the agency would use the $80 billion for improved operations, pledging to invest in new technology, hire more customer service representatives, and expand its ability to audit the high wealthy taxpayers. The plan lays out the specifics of how the IRS would allocate the $80 billion through the fiscal year of 2031. Remember, this large number is over a 10-year period. Remember that. Now, the Congressional Budget Office has projected that $1.4 billion the Congressional Budget Office has projected that the $1.4 billion rescission will actually increase deficits by about $900 million over the next decade because it will lead to tax revenue, less tax revenue coming in because, you guessed it, I gotta get my dogs, I'm sorry. Be right back. I apologize for that, everybody. My dogs decided to bark at somebody outside, and I'm home alone, so I couldn't rely on other people to get them. All right. So let's double check the chat really quick, make sure I'm up on the screen. Okay. Where was I? Oh, okay. So the Congressional Budget Office has projected that 1.4 billion rescission will actually increase the deficit by about $900 million over the next decade because it will lead to less tax revenue coming in due to less audits and the like. Quote, CBO anticipates that the rescission, quote, CBO anticipates that rescinding those funds would result in fewer enforcement actions over the next decade and in a reduction in revenue collections, according to the May 30th report to Speaker McCarthy. The IRS enforcement staff has shrunk by about 1/3 since 2010, leading to lower income and minority taxpayers being audited at a higher percentage than the wealthy, simply because those kind of audits are done via mailing flyers. They basically send out a thing to people and they're like, hey, you owe us money. And people are like, okay, and pay it. Part of the reason why they're doing this, all right, Republicans are doing this, is because they don't agree with taxes pretty much like at all. So cutting the IRS to the bone means less tax money going to the government, which means more people having their quote unquote own money. And that is a good thing to them. I don't like all the fuck games everybody plays with the IRS and taxes and everything like that. I would much prefer a simpler tax code where simpler, not necessarily lower, but a simpler tax code that basically is like all income treated the same, blah, blah, blah. But we can't have that. We have too many special interest groups. So we have the system that we have. Continuing on. Full funding for the medical care of military veterans will also increase, in line with what President Biden had sought. Work requirements for welfare programs, though, that's a tricky widget. A central demand of Republicans was to toughen up the distribution of welfare benefits by attaching strings that would mean able-bodied recipients having to work to get food and health care assistance. Democrats were adamant that this should not be on the table. The welfare looked at by Republicans included Medicaid, health coverage for poor Americans, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which is also known as food stamps, colloquially by people, and temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, which is what welfare, giving out money, that sort of stuff is. On the Medicaid side, that remains untouched in the deal. But the age at which work requirements are included for those on SNAP was raised from 50 to 54. There are caveats in the bill on those work requirements, though. For instance, the work requirements for TANF will be done as pilot programs in up to 5 states to negotiate performance benchmarks for work and family outcomes. Sorry, if you're living in those 5 states, you're just fucked. Yeah. Great job, everybody. Let us keep doing block grants. God, I fucking hate shit. I hate block grants so much, I swear to God. But what can you do? What can you do? Woo-hoo. For a budget deal? A lot, apparently. A lot. For SNAP, the caveats include exceptions for the unhoused, veterans, and people under the age of 24 who aged out of the foster care system on their 18th birthday. So those are reasonable. Those are reasonable. The FRA also increases the age limit for work requirements on able-bodied adults without dependents from 49 to 54 by 2025, though the provisions would expire by 2030. So again, hold on. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that, y'all. Oops, hit the button. Oh, come on, bro. There we go. All right, where was I? I was getting screwed. Okay, so the FRA also increases the age limit for... Frank, stop. The FRA also increases the age limit for work requirements on able-bodied adults without dependents from 49 to 54 by 2025, though the provisions would expire by 2030. So that means that people that are not near retirement age necessarily will have to continue to try to work to get those benefits. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing in of itself, but I'm very hesitant to add work requirements to any form of assistance, because if they were able to work, or if they could find a job, they would, because SNAP isn't enough to live on. So yeah, it's kind of stupid in my opinion to do this. I don't think it's going to save much money. It's just going to harm a few people, you know? Additionally, new rules will make it easier for both fossil fuel and renewable energy projects to get licenses. This has long been advocated by Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Manchin had thrown his support behind the IRA last year after a concession by Democrats to ease these licenses process, but lost the concession when Republicans demanded it be retracted. This bill would basically streamline the environmental review process and potentially get projects off the ground in a faster time frame. There are multiple rescissions in the FRA, nearly all having to do with unobligated monies appropriated under the COVID legislation, which likely would have been reappropriated when the national health emergency ended. Here's what isn't in the bill, though. Student loan relief. Republicans had wanted the Biden plan to forgive student debt to be rescinded, but it actually survived. Win for Biden. This agreement resumes payments at the end of August. Biden had planned to unpause payments on September 1st. Tax hikes. Democrats had targeted wealthy Americans for new tax hikes, but there are no new taxes in this bill. Clean energy. Republicans had wanted to repeal key provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy and climate provisions, but those survived unscathed as well. And thank God, too, if you actually want to have reductions in the cost of living, renewable energy is one of the ways to go. Nikki just said $6 a day for a single person from SNAP. Yeah, it's not much, guys. Really not. Continuing on. According to an analysis by The Guardian, sometimes presidencies are about things that don't happen. Joe Biden can breathe a sigh of relief. America is apparently not going to default on his watch. Biden could also claim vindication for the underlying theory of his presidency, that in the age of polarization, it takes an apostle of bipartisanship and a 36-year veteran of the Senate to reach across the aisle and make deals with his opponents. I'm going to go because it's not that I want to see no compromise. I don't mind compromise as long as it's good compromises. Some of these compromises are kind of bad. I don't like the work requirements necessarily. The other things are kind of a little give and take here. So maybe on the whole, it's pretty decent given divided government. But at the end of the day, this shouldn't have happened in the first place. That's why I'm like, to it. You know what I mean? Like compromise for the actual budgets. It could have easily been a 2024 budget negotiation. There is the funding of the government coming up. This is going to happen again, except it's not going to be catastrophic for the economy. Do it then, you know? I don't know. That's just me. Only Biden, the argument goes though, could have bridged the divide that seems unbridgeable in the age of Donald Trump. This deal protected Biden's legislative accomplishments, including the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. It fended off Republicans' attempts to repeal green energy incentives. The White House also swept aside Republican proposals to slash funding for education, healthcare, law enforcement, and Social Security. Masterful play on the State of the Union address. Good job on that one. The far-right Freedom Caucus unleashed sound and fury against this deal, inadvertently complimenting Biden on having outfoxed McCarthy, quite an achievement for a man they also insist isn't senile. Republican Nancy Mace accuses McCarthy of being outdone by a man who, quote, can't find his pants. This idea that Biden is suffering from dementia is just not based at all in reality. Listen to him talk. Yes, he stutters. He fumbles over his words. He always has. He's older now. He's going to do it a little bit more often. It takes a lot of practice when you have a stutter to not flub stuff. Okay? The fact that he's still going strong and being able to make these jokes and stuff means that his mind is working. But he's 80. It's not working as fast as it used to. It doesn't necessarily have to. Now, continuing on though. As for the possible threats to McCarthy's speakership, there has been no mass revolt against him so far either. Progressives voted against the bill, but largely understand that quote-unquote MAGA Republicans had taken the economy hostage and left Biden with no choice but to negotiate the ransom. Although I would say that a lot of progressives just wanted him to implement the 14th Amendment option. Mint the coin. That's what they wanted. I don't think that, well, the 14th Amendment would have been fine. Minting the coin, I think, is stupid. That's a whole other episode. Maybe we'll do one. Continuing on, though. They wanted those two things. This House vote could hardly have been more Biden-esque in hitting the sweet spot between left and right. It was his predecessor who wrote a book titled The Art of the Deal. But it's Biden who continues to exceed low expectations by finding common ground, or at least threading the needle, in a disappearing middle America. Wait, middle political America. Oops. Now, obviously, the fight isn't over until the FRA passes in the Senate. And if that body is forced to amend the bill in order to garner the votes needed for passage, the deal in the House may find itself in a precarious position. Secretary Janet Yellen has targeted June 5th as the X date. She pushed it back a little bit. Again, June 1st is that kind of, like, the X date's probably around June 10th or so. It's a moving target based on revenues coming into the government, other extraordinary measures, blah, 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 blah. June 1st should have been the cutoff date, in my opinion, but we haven't defaulted, which is all that really matters. And then if we get to that date and we actually default because of games, well, expect the economy to take a fast nosedive. Well, not the general economy, but at least the stock market. And if that happens, or whatever happens when they pass the bill or not, you can be sure to find that news here on the News Roundup. But with that, my friends, that concludes this segment of the Roundup. Now, if there's anything you would like to see us cover on the News Roundup, there are numerous ways to get a hold of us, ping us, tell us what you want to hear, bait us, etc. First off, you can join our Discord server. Links above or below, depending on where you're watching this. We're trying to build our Discord community. We want to have contests. We are technically a registered not-for-profit in the state of Texas, so we can do things with some of the money we generate that other people wouldn't necessarily want to do or would be legally allowed to. So that's some of the things we want to do. We want to build an actual community. So hey, join the Discord server to get some of that. You can also hit us up on Facebook. Yes, we still use Facebook. A little bit older than some of the people on here, but we still use Facebook. You can find us at Facebook/groups/Tribune Commons. And you can also, of course, find me on Twitter at CrowdsourcePoll. I share memes. I debate people. I get involved. Not as much as I used to. Well, maybe a little more. I don't know. It's all up in the air because of Elon Musk's Twitter. But you get the idea. You can hit me up there. And if you do Mastodon, you can find me at CSP Cypher at federated.press on Mastodon. Those are the ways you can get a hold of us. But let us continue on. Let's continue on now with the News D Roundup. Oops, sorry.
6 opinions.
I hate autoplay. Ugh. All right. So we haven't done a SCOTUS update in a while, at least in a few weeks. So let's go ahead and catch up with that now with our good friends of the pod, SCOTUS blog over on TikTok. Give you a bit of my opinion, let them summarize what's been happening in 2 minutes or 3 minutes or less. So let's go ahead and get to it that now. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's start.
6 opinions from the Supreme Court this morning. I can't fit them all in one talk, so let's start with the big one, and I'll end with what we're still waiting on from the court. In a pair of cases about the Anti-Terrorism Act and whether social media companies will continue to enjoy broad immunity from lawsuits over user content, the court sided with social media companies. For now, that means internet service providers like Google, Facebook, Twitter will continue to enjoy Section 230 immunity.
So Section 230 immunity is the only reason why social media exists. Without it, Twitch wouldn't be a thing. Neither would YouTube. It would get sued out of existence. They would have to actually become direct publishers. If conservatives want to bitch about content moderation now, wait until somebody can sue you because some person with 300 followers says something really fucked up and you get sued over it. Imagine how badly Alex Jones got sued for lying. Now imagine Twitter, YouTube, Facebook all getting sued for millions of dollars because they hosted Alex Jones. That's what would happen. That's why you guys need to understand these things. Why conservatives need to shut the fuck up and actually understand what the law is when it comes to Section 230. It doesn't say that they can't moderate. It says that they won't be held liable for failure to moderate, which is the only reason that we have these platforms.
That section of the Communications Decency Act, passed in 1996, makes it really difficult to hold these social media companies legally responsible for content that users post on their website because they're generally protected. So,
not only that, remember the comment sections on news articles? Yeah, those were a cesspool, right? Imagine them getting sued because somebody went viral on the comment section without a fact check about something stupid.
Even though justices like Clarence Thomas have suggested that social media companies have too much power and we should revisit Section 230, it will live to see another day. In Twitter v. Tomnet, the family of Nara...
The Section 230 should stay. There should be different laws on social media. Maybe maybe we could pass some sort of non-bias clause about moderation or something. But that should be separate from 230. That should be a different section of the code that talks about how moderation is done or allowed to be done. For example, why do we get banned from Twitter? A lot of people don't know. They don't know the exact reason, right? There isn't an appeal process to overturn a ban. It's very opaque. Maybe that should be a little bit enlightened.
Al-Assaf, a Jordanian citizen who was killed in a 2017 ISIS attack in Istanbul, claimed that Twitter and other tech companies aided ISIS by not keeping its content off their platform. The Anti-Terrorism Act allows U.S. nationals to sue anyone who aids and abets terrorism by knowingly providing substantial assistance. Today, the court unanimously said that Tomnet's lawsuit cannot go forward. In his opinion, Thomas wrote that simply creating a social media platform is not culpable, even if bad actors like ISIS are able to use those platforms for illegal and sometimes terrible ends. But the same could be said of cell phones, email, or the internet generally.
Thank you. Thomas actually said it correctly. Look at that, everybody. We can find common ground. Even with Clarence Thomas. Look at that.
The court said that the family didn't show a strong enough connection between Twitter and this specific terrorist attack in Istanbul in 2017, and that Twitter's relationship with ISIS is arm's length and passive, really no different than its relationship with the other billion-plus users on the platform. And the link between Twitter and the attack is even more attenuated. There was no evidence that ISIS specifically used Twitter to plan or carry out the attack. On a separate,
the tenuous at best relation might be why Elon Musk didn't allow Daily Wire to have its video full on YouTube or on Twitter without paying for anything. Curious.
lawsuit, the family of Noemi Gonzalez sued YouTube's parent company, Google. Gonzalez was the 23-year-old American killed in the 2015 ISIS attack in Paris. Her family claimed that YouTube helped ISIS recruit both through its recommendation algorithm and allowing ISIS to post videos on its platform.
The former, the recommendation algorithm, might have a point. I think that we can talk about how algorithms display information and how that can be biasing and otherwise bad. And yeah, I think that that there's a point to that, but not the latter, not the whole just allowing them to exist in general. Yeah.
This is the case where the court really teed up the Section 230 question and could have changed the internet as we know it. But they punted, sending the case back down, essentially saying there's probably not enough to go forward here, leaving Section 230 to live another day. We got 5 more decisions today, including one on Andy Warhol's Orange Prince. I'll have to do that one tomorrow. We're still waiting on decisions on student loans, affirmative action, LGBTQ free speech, voting rights, and the Indian Child Welfare Act. The next round of opinions will be next Thursday.
So all that stuff is quote unquote culture war stuff. The Indian Affairs Act and the adopting of Native American children is actually a pretty interesting case. Hopefully we can talk about it at some point, the particulars of it. But let's go ahead and go over to the next SCOTUS video here and cover some additional stuff.
3 decisions from the Supreme Court today. One that pretty much everyone can get on board with. Indeed, it was unanimous. 94-year-old Geraldine Tyler had racked up $15,000 in debt from unpaid real estate taxes. Then the government took her house, sold it for $40,000, and pocketed the extra $25,000 and didn't give it back to her. Now, Tyler argued that violated the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. That prohibits the government from taking your property without just compensation. Now, the lower courts disagreed with her, but today, all 9 justices said she made a plausible claim that the government screwed this one up. 2, the Supreme Court significantly rolled back the government's power to impose clean water protections.
Oh, no.
This case is about the Sacketts, a couple who bought property in Idaho, wanted to build on that land, but got blocked by the EPA to the tune of a $40,000 a day fine because their property was considered a wetland under the Clean Water Act. That's the principal law regulating water pollution in the United States. A wetland is like a marsh. Think the Everglades in Florida. In this case, the Sacketts' property is close to an unnamed tributary that feeds into a creek that feeds into Priest Lake, which is a big body of water that's designated by the EPA for protection under the Clean Water Act.
Okay, so to basically kind of recap why all this is important is because if one part of the wetland is destroyed or damaged, it can impact that entire chain to the point of where a lake in this case could end up, basically running dry and negatively impact all the people that rely on that for fresh water and everything else like that. So this isn't necessarily as clean of a thing of like, why is the government telling people they can't build on their property? Because it negatively impacts other people. This is why you can't just leave things to like individuals all the time, because if you dam a river upstream, right, you can negatively impact the people below stream. If you let the water go because of like severe flooding upstream, you can flood downstream. Like these are issues that are real. It's why a lot of people in Texas kind of get wrapped up with, or at least used to. This was a common thing. I don't know so much about it anymore, but capturing water for their own personal uses on Texas and not letting it go through the water tables. So there's states, I think Texas being one of them, that actually makes it illegal to have water collection sites on your property that are over a certain gallonage because of stuff like that. And it makes sense. It really does. It sucks, but that's how you have shared resources, and they have to be managed.
Nobody debates that the lake is protected. The question is, how far removed do we get? And today, a majority of the justices said we don't go so far back as going from lake to creek to unnamed tributary to property across the road. But the effect of today's decision, which really narrows the definition of wetlands to those that are indistinguishable from larger bodies of water, restricts the EPA's power and which wetlands waters it can protect.
Oof.
It's a win for the oil and gas industries,
Yep.
who will now have fewer restrictions on pollution, and it's a loss for the Biden administration, who said today's decision upends the legal framework that has protected America's waters for decades. And finally,
All right, before we let her continue on with that one, that is why these cases are brought and really gets all the attention they get. This is one of those situations where a small case can have giant implications for the rest of the law and gives large corporations, money to interest, a reason to fund the lower cases, looking for people that have been damaged in some way that they are seen to be unjustly done, and try to restrict laws that are really put in place for them to prevent pollution and the like. That is why this case had gotten there. It's also why people donating money to the Supreme Court people by becoming friends like Harlan Crow with Justice Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, or I'm sorry, not Alito, Scalia. I don't know who Alito's rubbing elbows with necessarily right now. Why that is also bad. You can see how these all come together. There's a lot of the the case that was mentioned with the Native Adoption Act or whatever, that is being targeted because that implicates Christians in their inability to proselytize to other people by adopting children. So this has a lot of backing from those because they want to use it as a wedge issue, as a wedge case, in order to dismantle other protections in the Civil Rights, not Civil Rights Act, I'm sorry, but other cases involving civil rights, affirmative action, etc. By finding a case that they think will be amicable to the conservative justices' worldview and get that in there, break it off, and so that they can tear away down at some of these protections and things. The reason why that case is in particular dicey, in my opinion, is because the whole reason why we have the child protection and giving first there's no really good way to say it, but why they're doing that is because the native population had been targeted by the state for eradication, and one of those is forced adoptions. And so in order to go with the treaties and that sort of thing, they will have the first pass on adopting native children. If that gets overturned, then they can use the precedent of that decision to overturn other native land rights. So that's why you have these cases. And like Nikki says, it's not just impacting people, but it's impacting fauna, animals, birds, the environment in general. But that is why these cases exist the way they do. They exist because they see some way to chip away at protections that get in the way of moneyed interest or other ideological things, and they chip away at it, and then they can use that as precedent to chip away at the other thing. They're playing the extreme long game. If the native case, like I said, if the native case rules in favor of the plaintiff, which is the people that wanted to adopt a Native American child but were not natives themselves, then that can be used as precedent to go after water rights and protections that then can give the federal government under a Republican administration the ability to give away native land. It's not a conspiracy. This is how things work. But there's only one case left on here, so we're going to let her go ahead and talk about it.
The justices unanimously sided with Maryland prison officials who are facing a federal civil rights lawsuit for viciously beating a man who was held for pretrial detention. Kevin Younger was left bloodied and unconscious in his Baltimore prison cell in 2013. He filed a 1983 lawsuit, and a jury awarded him $700,000. The case is a technical one about when you're required to raise certain arguments throughout the course of a case. And if you're a civil procedure student right now about to take your final exam, I would recommend reading this one for a refresher. But the bottom line is the prison officials get to keep challenging the jury verdict that was awarded to Younger in court.
Okay. Essentially that they can appeal it again rather than it not going there. But that is the SCOTUS updates. Hope that was good. We got more on the wetland decision, though. So let's talk about a little bit more of that. So although the justices agreed that the Sacketts should win the case, they disagreed with the reasoning, according to Newsweek. Those in the controlling opinion, Justices Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, and Chief Justice John Roberts, applied a much broader legal standard, which will likely limit the EPA's reach in the future. Justice Brett Kavanaugh broke with his conservative colleagues in the case, siding with the three liberals on the bench in a concurring opinion. In this concurring opinion, he said that he respectfully disagreed with the court's new test, pointing out that it was a departure from a 45 years of consistent agency practice from this court's precedents. Quote, by narrowing the Act's coverage of wetlands to only adjoining wetlands, the court's new test will leave some long-regulated adjacent wetlands no longer covered by the Clean Water Act, with significant repercussions for water quality and flood control throughout the United States, Kavanaugh wrote. The court's Thursday ruling came after President Joe Biden's administration finalized a rule expanding the definition of wetlands that are protected under the Clean Water Act, in a reversal from former President Donald Trump's era. Biden in April vetoed legislation that sought to overturn that rule. And that, my friends, concludes this segment of the News Roundup. So let's continue on with some more news. Making sure we don't have any comments that we need to take care of right now. Looks like we're good. So let's go ahead and start continuing. And we're going to talk about union strike damage claim rejected. What is this? We're going to talk about it. So NBC News reported on a decision released today in favor of a concrete company in Washington state seeking to revive a lawsuit against the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, alleging that a strike damaged its product. The 8-1 decision, written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, means that the company, Glacier Northwest Inc., can pursue a lawsuit against the union in state court over an August 2017 strike, in which the drivers walked off the job, leaving wet concrete in their trucks. Barrett wrote that a state court was wrong to dismiss the claims at such an early stage in the process, based on its concerns that the claims conflicted with the National Labor Board Relations Act, or NLRA. The NLRA is a federal law that protects union activity. Quote, because the union took affirmative steps to endanger Glacier's property rather than reasonable precautions to mitigate that risk, the NLRA does not arguably protect its conduct, Barrett wrote. Organized labor advocates had raised concerns that a ruling in favor of the company could stifle strike action by putting unions on the hook for potential losses employers can face as a result of such activities. Liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented, saying the ruling risked erosion of the right to strike. Depends on how narrow it is. If this is considered an affirmative step, basically, hey, we got the trucks, we loaded up the trucks with cement and then left them, then that kind of is malice, right? Rather than just walking off the job site and then not doing, you get where I'm coming from that, I think you do. Continuing on, though, Jackson pointed to the fact that the NLRA issued a complaint after the state court ruling, charging the company with unfair labor practices and saying that the driver's actions were arguably protected. By ruling in favor of the company, the court, quote, inserts itself into this conflict, proceeding to opine on the propriety of the union strike activity, despite not being the best place to weigh the facts, she wrote. Excuse me. Noel Francisco, the company's lawyer, said the ruling, quote, vindicates the long-standing principle that the federal law does not shield labor unions from tort liability when they intentionally destroy an employer's property. Business interests that are often in conflict with organized labor have been heavily critical of the labor board in the past. The Supreme Court's conservative majority has ruled against unions on several occasions in recent years, including a 2018 case ruling that said public sector workers who chose not to join a union can't be compelled to pay a share of union dues for covering the cost of negotiating contracts. This is right to work law redux for federal employees. Essentially, what that means is that right now, under the National Labor Relations Board and the NLRA, even members that aren't a member of the union, even workers that aren't a member of the union, are still given or have to be given the same contract as those that are, and they still have to have the same protections in the workplace offered by the union. So the unions typically charged everyone that even if they didn't join the union, some of the membership dues, because they had to give most of the protection. Made sense. Now we're going to see split shops, essentially. But yeah, that's where we are. And that actually concludes our segment about the Supreme Court. If you are liking what you're hearing so far, please smash that like button for the algorithms. Hit that follow button. Ring the bell. It really does help us out. And also, be sure to check out the YouTube channel for segment content of this newscast if you've missed any in the past, because there's some good stuff on there. But let us continue on now into our News Bite segment. And first, we're up for the hunt for Biden corruption. Let's talk about it. As the news of the compromise debt ceiling legislation wreaked havoc among the far right, deflections turned to direct allegations of corruption by President Biden. The big story right now is the allegation that Biden was involved in a bribery scheme. As always, the Ruse Roundup takes you beyond the headlines, where the facts live and clickbait dies. First up, let's talk about the by now famous FBI form known as FD 1023. GOP Representative James Comer of Kentucky, the chairman of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, said in a statement on Wednesday that the FBI Director Christopher Wray confirmed, quote, the existence of an unclassified record that contains reporting of an alleged bribery scheme related to then Vice President Joe Biden and a foreign national. Whoa, bombshell. Holy shit, is this true? This sounds super serious. Like super serious. We got to investigate now, people. We have to get to the bottom of this. And this is really bad for the president. That's what Comer and company, though, want you to think. But the fact is that the form that Comer is referring to is not an investigative form. On top of that, it was provided in a trance of documents from none other than our good friend, Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani. Stick your hands in your pants and dance, Giuliani. And it's dated June 30th of 2020, which coincides with Giuliani's trip to Ukraine to find things for Trump to use against Joe Biden in the 2020 campaign. It goes back, my friends. Yes, this is true. This is where it goes back to a conspiracy theory that just frankly won't die. You can beat that horse to death, but it keeps on kicking. And that, my friends, is when he was vice president, Biden was involved in corrupt activities in Ukraine to keep his son out of trouble. And yet, there is nothing there. Nothing there! I keep looking, but I can't find anything. Is it under this bowl? Is it under that rock over there? No. There's nothing there. Or at least, as we know right now. Why do we say that? Well, here's how the New York Post reported this story just last month. As vice president, the elder Biden also used U.S. aid as leverage to pressure Ukraine to fire prosecutor who had been investigating Burisma. Pro-House Democrats who impeached former President Donald Trump in 2019 for pushing Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. Presented evidence at Trump's trial that U.S. allies also advocated for the prosecutor's ouster due to his own corruption. Again, boom! Oh my God. You hate to see it. It's just fucking wow. Wow. Because this is how the media spins their biases. The liberal media does it too. Don't get us twisted. We understand that corporate press all across the political spectrum is in the business of making money and preferring their allies. In fact, what am I saying? It's not just corporate press. It's the independent press too. Everybody is engaged in this kind of level of spin, including us every once in a while. Shocker! I know. We try our best not to spin anything. But we all have our biases, and sometimes we're wrong. When we're wrong, we'll tell you. But we won't leave a completely false impression in people's minds, like we said. This happens with everybody. Now, what actually happened, though? What is the truth of the matter? Well, then Vice President Biden was charged with carrying a message to the Ukrainian government from the United States Congress, President Obama, the International Monetary Fund, and every single U.S. ally. That message was to fire the prosecutor who refused to investigate government corruption, or Ukraine would not be given a loan guarantees it desperately needed. Oh my God. You mean the United States, with its big money bags, and the rest of the world wanted the Ukrainians to investigate corruption to ensure that that big giant donation of money, oh my God, they wanted to make sure that that big money bag was spent wisely and not corrupted. Oh man, can you believe it? Man, you gotta, you know what? If you're giving money to people, you want to make sure it's going to the right places. And that is what Biden was attempting to do. Now, many right-wing mouthpieces in the media continue to this day, despite no evidence whatsoever. Despite the lack of evidence. But they claim Biden did this on his own volition, despite the fact that other countries said that they were doing it, despite the fact that the IMF said they're going to do it, despite the fact that Obama said he was going to do it, despite the fact that Congress wanted this to happen. It was all Biden to keep his failed son out of trouble by avoiding an investigation into Burisma. Fail Biden, fail Hunter Biden, fail son Hunter Biden needed daddy's help to not get in trouble. A lot of good that did. Dick's pictures all over the place. Horse cock. Yes, I have seen it. It is massive. It is huge. The things you see on Twitter, everybody. Twitter. But that's what they're still saying. Now, Burisma, though you may recall, was a Ukrainian national gas company. Hunter Biden sat on their board. What did he got paid? He got paid money to be a board member, which is not illegal. It is, to some measure of common sense, common decency, common parlance, to be not necessarily out and out corrupt, but maybe a little soft corruption. Maybe a little bit of trading on daddy's name. Hey, if I hire this person's son, maybe they'll give me some leeway. But my friends, this is the United States. We're not some kind of going around the clock oligarchy, at least not fully. And yeah, you can hire, I mean, you can hire people. You can trade on your name. doesn't mean that the government's going to do anything for you. And what happened? Prisma got investigated anyways? Oh no! Yes, it got investigated anyways. So, money well spent, friend. But there's the kicker. There was no investigation into Burisma at the time that Biden carried this message to Ukraine. Wasn't even an investigation happening yet. Did it happen? Yeah, it did. This is all a manufactured rabbit hole for Republicans. The FBI defines an FD 1023 as one of many forms the FBI uses to collect and catalog information for its law enforcement and national security work. When agents are conducting an FD 1023 report, they are not, at that point in their investigation, assessing the credibility of the source of information being given to them. In other words, this is on our radar, we catalog it, and we do whatever we need to do it with afterwards. Quote, all that form is literally an FBI agent sitting down with a source, and we don't know the veracity of the source and taking their information down word for word, according to former FBI agent Tracy Wadler, who spoke to Dan Abrams in an interview for News Nation. Walder added that, quote, it's highly unusual for someone to demand the release of an FD 1023. Excuse me, let me repeat that. Walder added that it's highly unusual for someone to demand the release of an FD 1023, and that the House Oversight Committee's request seems like a very broad fishing expedition. The form is used by agents to, quote, record unverified reporting that a confidential human source, and that confidential human source information is highly sensitive. The FBI says the information from the source in some reports are unverified and, by definition, incomplete. Again, humans lie. Humans talk a big game. We know it. You know it. You're watching a fucking political show on Twitch. You get it. Glad you could be here. I don't know how to forgot Nanja. All right, good, cool. I'm giving you some good news. Good news. But Ariel, that's what I was saying. We know that humans lie, and so you have to do due diligence. You have to take the information that they're giving you, and you have to verify it. And then you have to do that. You can't not record it. You have to have it recorded for prosperity. That's what happened. But James Comer is a one-determined MAGA Republican. He subpoenaed FBI Director Christopher Wray and demanded a copy of this form. In response, Christopher Wray? Is it Y? Yes, we actually covered that earlier. Covered that earlier. And it's not it's not avoided yet, but pretty much is. So Christopher Wray has thus far refused to turn it over. Comer now says he intends to make a referral to the DOJ for a contempt of Congress charge against the FBI director. In response to this latest attack on the president, White House spokesman Ian Sams said in a statement, quote, for going on 5 years now, Republicans in Congress have been lobbying unfounded, unproven, politically motivated attacks against the president and his family without offering evidence for their claims or evidence of decisions influenced by anything other than the U.S. interest, Sam said. Continuing on, he quoted saying, quote, that's because they prefer floating anonymity, innuendo, amplified by the megaphone of their allies in right-wing media to get attention and try to distract and deflect from their own unpopular ideas and lack of solutions to the issues the American people actually care about. And that's the story of this manufactured tempest in the GOP teapot. To date, anyways. This search by MAGA Republicans for dirt on the president is an ongoing, ever evolving story. So we will keep you updated and stay tuned to this program Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll give you updates. And so make sure that you are armed with the facts and not. But that concludes this segment of the News Roundup. I do not give anybody stock tips. This is not a financial advice program. So I have lost some money in the stock market, so you wouldn't want my advice anyways. Although I think everybody's lost money in the stock market except people that are like virusively day trading all the time. But yeah, I've picked some winners and I've picked some losers, but can't give you financial advice. I'm sorry. All right. Let's see. But yeah, glad that you're here. Gotta appreciate you. And yes, as we said, the default has not been fully avoided yet, but more than likely will be avoided. And yes, that is a good thing. All right. But let us continue on with the news. Now we're moving on to the economy and labor. And we're going to talk first up about the debt ceiling fight's impact on the US economy and its credit rating. So Reuters reported today that the dollar drifted from a 2-month high on Thursday as investors trimmed bets that the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates this month through a vote of I'm going to restate all that because a guy on a motorcycle decided to drive by. So we're going to start that over. So to start over, Reuters reported today that the dollar drifted from a 2-month high. Sorry. All right. Repeating it one more time. I have to get this for the clip. I'm sorry. It's just what we have to do. Okay? Bear with me. Reuters reports today that the dollar drifted from a 2-month high on Thursday as investors trimmed bets on the Federal Reserve's will to raise interest rates this month through a vote of approval from the U.S. House to suspend the debt ceiling limit. Some support to the greenback. As a support to greenback. The dollar showed little reaction to the news initially, though it gained ground over the course of the Asian trading day to reverse some losses from earlier in the session. Quote, "Our view is that the U.S. government will avoid a default that could potentially derail the U.S. and also the global economy," said Carol Kong, a currency strategist at Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Continuing on, they stated, quote, "I think the dollar can gain a little bit more support on a successful vote today." Fed officials, including the vice chair, designated, Fed officials, including the vice chair designated, pointed towards a rate hike skip in June, giving time for the U.S. Central Bank to assess the impact of its tightening cycle thus far against still strong inflation data. Hey, our good friend, Nate Dallin, they're finally doing the pause. It's only, god dang, almost a year late, but they're finally doing it. They kept tightening till something in the economy broke. What broke? Banks. Banks are the first to break during a tightening of interest rates. So we finally got that. Finally got that little bit of reprieve. Like I said we would. In this time frame. Go figure. Ah, man, it is good to be right. I tell you what. My friends, just I can't miss, dude. I just can't miss. When it comes, call me the Fed whisperer at this point. Holy crap. But hey, I'm not going to toot my own horn too much, so we're going to continue on. According to Market Watch, U.S. Treasury yields were lower today after House of Representatives passed the debt ceiling deal Wednesday evening. Investors turned their attention to labor market data for more clues on whether the Federal Reserve will keep raising interest rates at its June policy meeting. As we just said, they're going to take a pause. U.S. private sector payroll rose by 278,000 in May, far above Wall Street's estimates of 180,000. It's almost like the economy is readjusting. Oh my God. And this, of course, is coming from the payroll services firm ADP as of this morning. The ADP data is widely seen as a predictor of the government's May jobs data, scheduled to be released tomorrow. Forecasts are calling for the May employment report to show yet another month of strong hiring, suggesting that any recession, should one take place at all, is still far on the horizon. It should be noted that recessions typically don't happen in summer. They typically happen in the fall or the early spring. All to winter-ish time frame. So, not surprising. However, the number of Americans who applied for unemployment benefits at the end of May edged up a little bit to a 1-month high of 232,000. But there's no sign of major layoffs, and many businesses are still hiring. Now, that is true. Some tech companies have laid off, quote, massive amount of people, but what is happening, though, is that they're getting eaten up by smaller firms. They want that experience, even if it wasn't much. They need the labor because they're sitting on capital. They're trying to produce goods and services, especially in the AI sphere. So that's what we're seeing there. Markets, though, are now pricing in a 71% probability that the Fed will leave interest rates unchanged at a range of 5% to 5.25% after its June 13th and 14th meeting, according to CME FedWatch tool. It's springtime in Texas, or summer, so they got motorcycles outside now. Sorry if you can hear that. Now, on this program, I said that I do not see the Fed raising rates beyond much to what they are now. We could see them ease up to 5.5 to 5.75, maybe 6%. But I did say that my predictor would be 5.25 to 5.5. If they pause in June and then raise it in their next meeting, the likelihood of them raising it again in before Christmas is pretty low. Quote, U.S. Treasury yields dropped across the yield curve yesterday with the yield curve bull flattening. Lower than expected inflation in Germany and Fed's members' speeches contributed to decreased rate hike bets for June, contributing to the bond rally, said a strategist at Saxo Bank in a morning note today. We quote, continuing on, quote, we still believe that the risk of liquidity squeeze remains elevated as the Treasury must issue around $1 trillion to replenish its reserves. According to approximately $500 billion will need to be raised in just 4 weeks. That would be the biggest quarterly issuance outside of a crisis such as the pandemic and the global financial crisis. So, chances of raising rates, a little low. But we have more news about the economy. We have the Fed Reserve Beige Book report. So MT Newswriter reported that the U.S. economic activity was a little changed overall last month and in early May, while the growth outlook weakened slightly. This is according to the Federal Reserve in its latest Beige Book released on Wednesday. Quote, high inflation and the end of COVID-19 benefits continue to stress low budgets of low and moderate income Americans, driving increased demand for social services, including food and housing. The previous report, which was released on April 19th, showed the economy activity was little changed in recent weeks and the growth expectations remained largely steady. The Beige Book showed that the outlook deteriorated a little through contracts still largely expected a further expansion in activity. Although prices grew moderately, the pace slowed in many districts, with contacts in most districts projecting a similar pace of price increases in the coming months, according to the document. Official data released last week showed that the U.S. real gross domestic product in the first quarter increased at a 1.3 annualized rate, up from a 1.1 pace initially projected. In the first quarter, real GDP rose 2.6%. In other words, revisions upwards, which means the likelihood of a recession happening is decreased again. Continuing on with our economic news, we now move on to wage growth and inflation. And this is where the kicker is, because it's not good. We know it's not good. But Americans are still spending money, so there's some give and take here. It is often quoted that the quickest way to see lower prices is higher prices. The quickest way to stop inflation is higher prices, because it changes spending habits and people tighten their belts. And we're going to see some of that up in now. So we have this graph here. The black line represents inflation. Okay. The blue line represents wage growth. And we can see that inflation kicked off in May, basically, of May of 2021, and peaked in July of 2022, and still has fallen steadily, not decreased. We don't have deflation, we have disinflation, which is the slowing of the inflation rate, all the way to March, where we have a lower inflation projection than we have in wage growth. So Americans are getting squeezed. Not get me twisted. We are seeing that is hard and it sucks. But we have to talk about it, what it shows. So reporting from UPI shows hiring in the US economy remains somewhat resilient to inflationary pressures. In other words, despite the fact that firms are feeling the pinch of inflation, they are still hiring more people to meet demand. Important. Wage growth is starting to slow. The latest employment snapshot from private payroll processor ADP has also found. Neela Richardson, the chief economist at ADP, said that this marks the second month in a row for a decline in pay. So going back over to the chart, I shouldn't have left it. So you see it's at 6.1, 6.1, 6.4, 6.1. So you see this is hovering around 6% here. All right, we're going to leave the chart now, though. Pay growth is slowing substantially, and wage-driven inflation may be less of a concern for the economy despite robust hiring. Said. For those staying in their current position, wages increased by 6.5% in May, down from 6.7% the prior month. Job changers got a 12.1 boost in pay, down 1% point from April. Quickest way to a pay raise is getting a new job. That is it is. The slowdown in wages may be a welcome news for officials at the Federal Reserve, though, because they are working to cool the economy with successive increases in lending rates. Higher wages can lead to an increase in discretionary spending, driving inflation higher due to demand strains. It is called wage growth inflation spiral. Wages go up, inflation goes up. You ratchet back down because you demand more wages, and so it comes back, and it just loops all the way up. And finally, for our economic segment, we are going to move on to consumer confidence. So U.S. consumer confidence slipped to a 6-month low in May, according to Reuters. Americans' assessment of the labor market softened, but more households plan to purchase motor vehicles and other big-ticket items over the next 6 months, which could support economic growth this quarter. Honestly, my wife is looking to get a new car. This makes sense. People drove their cars for a bit longer due to the increase in unavailability of cars during the pandemic, so that might have just pushed demand back a bit. Might have a little bit more demand spiking for that. This makes sense. Now, the ebb in confidence reported by the Conference Board on Tuesday was concentrated among consumers aged 55 years and older, people approaching or in retirement, because they are on a fixed income. And this is also, this pressure, this lack of confidence, though, is in households with annual incomes in the $50,000 to $99,000 range. In other words, older people and middle class people are feeling more squeezed. We're having the ends, though, squeezing the middle. And why do I say that? Because poor people have seen a large increase in pay since the pandemic, And so they're probably feeling a bit better about themselves despite rising prices. Rich people, or people that are in upper middle class income bracket, also saw an increase in wage that outpaced inflation, at least with job changes and that sort of thing. Again, like we said, people that changed jobs got a 12.1% increase in their pay. That's double the inflation number. Why would they feel bad? Makes sense, right? So that is why we're seeing these things. But a fight to raise the government's borrowing cap weighed on the University of Michigan's consumer sentiment measures this month as well. In other words, consumer confidence was brought down by partisan bickering over the debt ceiling limit, which is another reason why it should not exist. But that, my friends, concludes this segment of the News Roundup. Now, if you're new to the News Roundup, or do you think oh, wait, before we get on to that, well, you've got a question. I should always check questions when I finish this segment. So, producer's asking, do you think the lack of confidence may also be attributed to media they consume? Yes. Negative media does impact people's perceptions of what is happening. This isn't to say that it is the only thing impacting their perceptions, but if they're consuming primarily negative reporting about the economy, then their likelihood of, even if their own position has improved, the overall feelings of the economy are going to wane. And this actually is something that we saw a lot of, actually. We saw this happening just after the pandemic. So just when things were opening back up, people were a little bit, last year, we'll say last year, people were very wary about the overall broad economic position of the United States, but their own personal positions, they felt very confident about. So they're like, got a new job, higher pay, maybe moved into a new house. Their life was going gangbusters, but their feelings about the broader economy and their tenuous position in it were negative. And that's why we saw conflicting numbers from consumer confidence, inflation, etc. So yes, Nikki, very much true. That is exactly partly what is going on here. This is not to say that people shouldn't be worried about the economy. This is not to say that inflation doesn't suck. As we saw on the chart, inflation is very much a problem. It has been for almost a year. It is going down. Prices are not increasing as much as they were. They're still increasing though, and people are noticing that because the spike has been so prevalent. My own personal notice was on actually the cost of beverages. I'm a peripherous Mountain Dew soda drinker, okay? And I have a problem. It's a little bit of an addiction, okay? But I noticed when a case of soda went from roughly $4.50 to $9.50 in a convenience store. And that changed my spending habits on soda a bit. Started buying generics. So this is something that people are noticing. It is something that is important. But it should not take away from the fact that we are seeing inflation, or the rise in inflation. We're seeing disinflation, and we have been since July of last year, as we predicted. Okay. Yes, I'm going to toot my own horn. I was right about this. And I've been right about it for a long time. No one believed me, and I've been saying this shit since 2021. The only change that I made in my inflation prediction was when Russia invaded Ukraine. I said, okay, Russia invaded Ukraine. I thought we'd see disinflation take hold in March. They invaded at March, right? They invaded, right? April, May. I said April, May, right? March, April, May, in that time frame. And I pushed it back until July. I was right. In fact, you can see it up here when you watch it on the video. But yes, we have to continue on though, because I have to walk my dogs. So yeah, that concludes our economic segment of the News Roundup. Now, for people that have not joined us previously, you may not know that we like to end our News Roundup with some news of the weird. Something as a little palate cleanser, something a little interesting, gross, often gross, and fun to talk about. And today is no different. First up, we have a video. We're going to have a video soon of stuff. but I have to let this ad play because the ad likes to reload. So yeah, we're gonna wait for the ad here. All right, there we go. We have a video of animals. We like to do animals news on this program, and so we're gonna do some animal news. But I gotta unmute. All right. Oh, there it goes. What we have here, a black cub stands and escapes with a wheeled trash can. They're getting smarter, everybody. The animals are coming for us. What is it doing? You can't tell me the animals aren't smart. They're doing this stuff. Do you remember? What is going on here? All right, so what was that? Well, that was a video from David Oppenheimer, captured and caught the black bear wheeling a bin away from his house as it tried to get into his trash can, but the cub was unaware it had been bear-proofed with metal brackets, according to Sky News. The bear was able to knock it over, try to get into the trash can, but it was thwarted. They're getting smarter, people. As we said, they're getting smarter. Now, we have another weird story. And this is about a woman that has done extreme body modification from corset training. What is that? Well, we're going to let this video play for about a minute and then talk about it.
Right now, my waist is, with the corset, 30 centimeters.
What?
I do a really extreme tight lacing. That's because my body can do it.
People think my look is extreme.
It is.
You are not real. You are a robot. My sister really doesn't like at all.
I'm concerned about seeing my sisters. She doesn't know about my new corset. I completely close this corset and then I reach a smaller one and then a smaller one and then a smaller one. And you never get like this sensation of it's enough. Who doesn't want a really small waist? Like a mermaid. That's what I like.
Okay, ma'am.
24-year-old Ruth has been practicing the art of corseting to give her the perfect hourglass figure.
It's okay. All right. This is one of those situations where, yeah, they can do whatever they want, but that is not good. That is not good whatsoever. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. So the 26-year-old former Mexican ballerina was diagnosed at 19 with hyperlaxity syndrome, a rare condition in which the ligaments that support joints have more stretchiness, according to Summit Orthopedics. Her ballet teacher was the first to notice something was wrong with her movements and advised her to consult a doctor. It, quote, made me feel sad, the dancer said. Because of this condition, continuing on, she said, because this condition is never going to allow me to wear ballet shoes again. But her new look is far from just a viral fashion statement, racking up millions of views on various social media platforms. There's her posing. Her doctors actually first suggested she wear corsets to protect her muscles and ligaments and avoid painful symptoms such as fatigue and stiffness when clicking in her joints. Quote, your muscles become weak, your ligaments too, and of course your spine, she explained in a YouTube video documenting her unusual journey. So even though that this is a bit extreme, there is a useful to it, but I think maybe taking it a little too far. I don't know. To each their own, so I'm not gonna say that she can't do this. As long as she's not hurting herself and it's not traumatic to her body, but who cares, right? Who cares? But that, my friend, concludes our news source today. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure, because without y'all, we'd just be a couple of people shouting into the void that is the internet. Please smash that like button for the algorithms. You stuck with us to the end, so I know you liked what you heard. Please do that. You can find this program every Thursday from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was from the last week, the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. Be sure to check out our other programs as they are released, Cipher State and long-form video essays or podcasts. You can see our recent debate with, or at least a segment of that, with CounterPoints on our channel, talking about Destiny and Abba's donations to the Atlanta Police Foundation. And it's a good video, so go ahead and check it out. Always, please join the Discord. We are trying to build our Discord community and do more fun things, so please join the Discord. And as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.